ready?
Yeah.
My name is Marjorie Lewis. I live in 76 Malcolm Street, Erskineville. I am 86 years old.
I am Lily Owen. I live in Malcolm Street, Erskineville. I've got to say how long? I'm not talking. For 75 years I have lived in my house.
And you are? Tell your age, you are?
No, not saying my age.
Oh.
Don't like it, no. Parents lived in Matraville and we had very heavy flooding at the time and we had to leave there, and Dad found this house in Malcolm Street, Erskineville, and that was 75 years ago, and I'm still here.
People in Erskineville were always very
it's lovely.
Very kind. Like, it was depression, of course, and those days were hard for our parents and so forth. But everybody shared. You could go in next door and ask, oh, can you give me a cup of sugar till, you know, I go and get some sugar. Or you could borrow anything and then you pay back.
We used to pay 20 shillings a week here. That was our rent, £1 a week. And the man that owned them lived right at the back here, Dick Bell, and he owned this whole terrace lot. And then when he decided to sell them, I thought the end of the world had come, because I didn't want to leave here, and I said, well, no way in the world we could buy a house, no way. But my mum said to me, you can surrender your insurance. I didn't know anything about it, so I had to put them in, and I got enough deposit to pay the house. And then I paid it off at £2.76 a week. It was £800, this house. £800. And I paid it off £2, and it was the hardest thing in my life.
Well, our social life, we used to go to the Hub Theatre
or the
Hoyts at Enmore.
Enmore.
We used to go dancing to the Surreyville. We loved dancing. We used to go to the Manchester.
Trocadero.
And picnics, mad on picnics, our generation. Everybody went picnicking, you know.
Go on picnics on the train, on the ghost train. McDonald Town. It was called the ghost train, and it left at a certain time every Sunday morning, and we were always on it.
And you never knew
National
where you
Park.
were going until you got there. That was the mystery
Didn't know
train.
where you were going. National Park or one of those places we'd go to. And it was only about sixpence in the train, and you know, used to have lovely days.
Opposite the Rose Hotel was a shop called David's, and it was the big
Then we had a little
store,
supermarket,
you know.
tiny, and then we had one on the corner, the grocery shop on the corner of Erskineville Road and Sydney Street.
You take a little notebook with you, and you tick up, and you get a loaf of bread and a pound of butter, and then when the ghost would give it to you, then at the end of the week you'd add up how much you had, and you'd have to, you know, find the money to pay.
And you got your wages, whatever, you know.
Yeah. What's the street? What's Binning Street? We used to have a little slow grog place there. We used to fill up quart bottles and have our beer, you know, the boys would get their beer during the war years.
Betting, SP, betting.
Yeah.
We used to run up the lane and run and put our little bets on. Yeah, SP.
Barbie Munro was the jockey of the day, and he rode most of the winners, so...
That's why we're still interested in them. Yeah. Where I've been with them that long.
That was fun. Trying to pick a winner. Still trying.
Of Haverding behind those, but seemingly a two-horse race. Moo Tide the inside, Plain Guy the outside.
they had a sixpenny dance at the stall every Saturday night, and we went down and were in having just all the old time dances they'd have, and anyhow, with that there was these two boys, and came in, and one of them came over and asked me for a dance, and I got up with him, and anyhow then he said, "See that chap over there?" I said, "Yes." He said, "He'd love to have a dance with you, but he's not game because he can't dance." So I said, "Well, yes, I will," but I said, "I hope he don't smell like you do." I said. He said, "Oh, I'm sorry, we've just come home from fishing." He said, "We've just pulled the boat in," and he said, "We've got the fish outside." So he said, "Well, we'll go home and we'll have a shower." Well, he came back with his wife and his mother-in-law, who was my husband's mother, and his three sisters. So they came back. The whole family comes out to have a look at what I look like, you know, because he was telling them, "Oh, he's fallen for someone," you know, blah, blah, blah. And that's how it all began. He said to me, "What was your name?" And I was very cautious, you know, and I said, "Oh, Beverly Watson," I said. And so anyhow, and I wouldn't give him the address. I said, "If you wish to ring me, you can ring, or write to me, I should say, Erskineville Post Office." Well, Lil went up and got the letter. I said to her, he said he was going to write, probably won't. But she went up, sure enough, and his handwriting, wasn't it, Lil? It was beautiful. I think I fell in love
Never
with
seen him. Wished I had something to show you.
I said, I think I fell in love with the writing before the man, you know. It was so beautiful.
And when
Give me a minute because I got another horse. 3:40 over the time, yeah. But no, we had a good life. I think we've had a wonderful life, really.
It's good up here though, isn't it, Marge? You never hear anything up here. Right? Well, I don't think you do now. Over down the road there, Currajong. You never hear of fighting down there now.
Turn on, turn on, turn on, turn it on.
Oh, they used to fight. A couple of blokes, they'd have too much and they'd get out in the front, you know, and they'd have a punch-up, yeah. But you never hear, do you?
They just kill you now. They just kill you.
I know, Balurgo's not a bad place. We don't hear much.
But
We don't hear much go wrong here.
Trying to wind up over on the outside. In the city's raised up. Hit the lead for Jane Oberlin. In the city, the visitor school seeking.
I got left in the barrier.
Oh, we lost all our money.
Yeah.
Well, my name's Els. You want my second name? This is what the name I was going to get at first. Elsa Agnes Green. I lived in I was born and reared in 22 Deep Street, Alexandria, and I'm still living here. And I was born on the 11th of the 1st, 1923. That makes me 84. It won't be long before I'll be 85. Never mind. All the kids that lived around here lived in the lane. This is one of the photos that showed Teddy and Audrey coming down the back lane in one of the barrows that we always made. My girlfriends more or less grew up in the lane. We used to go out after school. We'd come out and play either hopscotch or skippings. Oh, we used to have lovely times in the lane. 4 of us, there was Stella, Phyllis, Annie and myself. We used to, nearly every Saturday, they'd go up to Erskineville and St Peter's and walk along this road, streets there and have a look around, but sometimes of an afternoon. And there used to be a lot of dancing studios up there years ago, so we went in there one day and asked them, told them we wanted to learn dancing. We used to go to the pictures every Saturday afternoon, Saturday night. Or when we were kids, we used to go to the pictures, because in them days they used to have afternoon sessions. There used to be the St Peter's picture show, the Hoyts anymore, Newtown Majestic and the Lawson Theatre we could go to, and we used to take the kids of an afternoon and we'd put the kiddies in, push the kids in for nothing, and because the money that we had to pay their fare in, coming home we used to buy a pen of the, in them days you could get a pen of the chips, you know, you get a big, or ice cream, penny ice cream. Down where the bowling club is now, there used to be this big water tank. Because at Metters, when Metters used to be there, a steam tram used to come around to take them in up to Redfern Station and into Central, because they had to put water in it. Because we used to go there and play under there, and the boys used to get up there and have a swim. Oh, I'll never forget, once we went to National Park, there was Stella, Annie, Phyllis and myself went down, we hired a boat. And we were rowing along, because we had boys too that lived in this street. There was Ronnie King, Henry Hampshire, Roy Petrie and Jackie Timmins. Jackie Timmins didn't live here, but he was a mate of the boys. And they met us down there. And they commandeered the boat. They got in and took over the boat. And here they are rowing, and we said we'll have to pull in and have some lunch. So here we are. Ronnie's got the oar and he's pulling us into the ice we thought was the land. And as Annie went to get out, he let the boat go back, and Annie fell in the water. And and as she went in, she dragged poor Henry in. And there's Henry standing, and Annie and Henry there, wringing wet. So what we had to do, we had to light a fire and try and get their clothes dry. And I took an apron, and because you never wore shorts in them days, that was a no-no. And I had a petticoat on, so I had to give Annie the petticoat, and or a towel. They had to wrap a towel around poor Henry till he got his pants dry. And Phyllis, Stella, I'll never forget this, Stella said, oh, I got 2 pair of pants. So she on. So whatever she said, oh, what they had 2 pair of pants on for? I said, well, I don't know. So she gave Annie a pair of bird pants. That was we always laugh about that. And poor Henry, he wasn't going to go home because they were only a new pair of pants his mother had bought him. And his father said he wasn't allowed to go. And his father was a bit of a crank anyway. He got home and got home all right. But that was one part. We always talk about that, about what the boys done them days. Then because you had to put down a deposit when you hired the boats, they wanted to grab the deposit. I said, well, that's our deposit, not your deposit. Might have been only 5 shillings, or that 5 shillings was 5 shillings in them days. But we had some fun with them, and they used to follow us up to the pictures up here on Erskineville Road and sit behind us. And anyway, when the war came, we all got separated then. And but Phyllis ended up marrying Henry Hampshire, and then we had another friend, Ruthie, but she was never allowed to go out because her father was a missionary, and she was never allowed out. She wasn't allowed to go to the pictures, dancing, or swimming. Never allowed to have a haircut, couldn't wear makeup. But anyway, when her father died, she let loose and used to come to, because then that's when she was going with Roy then, and then they all could wear makeup and that. But then she married Roy. My girlfriend that I knew, Lily Trotman, that was a friend of my brother's mate, she called in to see us one day and she's in a uniform. And I thought, I said to Mum, that's what I'm going to do, join the army. I left and I joined the army medical. No, I'm not sorry, but I'm sorry that I got out when I did get out. I should have stayed in longer. But then I got married, didn't I, when I was in the army. I enjoyed it. So when I was young enough now, I'd go back in it again. I'll never forget when I was in the army, when we were doing our rookie course. That's what sparkled me up. I tell you what, you had to have a shower, and be dressed in a full uniform and be on parade within the hour. So you can imagine, about 40 girls, and I thought, well, we all got under the shower, you know, together, one at a time. No, it wasn't that. It was about 4 or 5 under the one shower. Oh, yes, yeah. You had to all get under 3 or 4 of that under the shower together. And not one at a time, you'd have never made it. About 40 of us waiting at your turn, it has still been sitting there. And of course, had to get in full uniform, that was collar and tie and everything, and on parade within the hour. Otherwise, if you was late, you wouldn't go on leave. Couldn't get a leave pass, so they're no word. And if they asked you to do anything, it wasn't yet. In a minute, you just jumped up and went. Yes, whatever you was doing, you dropped and went for your life. If you stood out drinking a glass of beer in them days, and if the police come along, they'd find you. Sitting out on the footpath drinking, good grief, that was a no-no. And as for women going into the hotels, oh, all the hotels that I've never been in any of them. All the hotels up here. Well, you weren't allowed in them days, my God. If you've seen walking in, although I will say, you know, some of the hotels used to have ladies' parlours where ladies could go and have a drink. But now, I think the worst thing they've ever done is let women go up and sit at the bar. But still, I'm old-fashioned now, they tell me.
My name is Terence Joseph Murphy. I was born on the 18th of October 1931, and I came here when I was 2 weeks old, and I've been here for 76 years. It's been a great house. My mother and father lived in the main room, 5 boys in one room, and 4 girls in the other room. I consider I was a lucky Australian. I was born after the 1914 war. I was born too early to go to the Second World War, and I certainly didn't qualify for any of the other wars. So I missed all that. And I consider I was lucky because I'd missed really the Depression, even though I was born in 1931. I never really ever felt that we had a depression. I was only a kid, and fortunately for my father, who was a gambler, in a way, he'd work, but he would gamble. We had a relatively comfortable life. Some people say, oh, Terry, you just couldn't have been that rich. Well, I remember I was that rich because my father bought me a pony, and I was the only one that had the pony. Peggy was the name of the pony. And I rode him everywhere. I rode him to Parramatta. And I rode him everywhere. In fact, there's a photo outside. I went in what was then the 8-hour march, when they were trying to get 8 hours a day for workers. I rode him in that. And there's a photo of me going past outside the town hall. During the Depression, a lot of people didn't realise they got to rely on what they called callers, people that would lend money. But you had no money, but you had blokes calling around and they'd sell you wear like bed clothing or stuff that was important for you. And a lot of men didn't like, they thought it was, you know, below their dignity to rely on them. But the wives and the mothers, they had to rely on them, and sometimes they'd do it secretly. The Second World War, a lot of people wouldn't admit it, was the great thing that happened. It got them out of a depression. Because once the depression started, once the war started, everyone was needed. Because of the soldiers that went overseas and the women were brought into industry. And, you know, people then had money, even though they were restrained in buying things. There was a black market where you could buy stuff, you could buy almost anything, petrol among it. After the war, there was that many people coming into Alexandria and Erskineville, but Alexandria was known as the Birmingham of Australia because that's where all the factories were. It was the biggest industrial area in the Pacific area. And they're down here at McDonaldtown, where you hardly see anyone come off the station now, there used to be thousands. They'd all be heading down Burren Street, up onto Erskineville Road, down into Metters. First job I ever had, what was the first job I ever had? Jeez, can't remember. But I finally ended up at Federal Match Company, which is down in Park Road, Alexandria, where the public school is now, in front of Alexandria Park. And I worked there for 20 years. And they employed 450 people. 300 would be women and 100 were men, and they produced matches for Bryant and May. And they were terrific people. They worked there. I had a ton of work, overtime galore, which was common after the war. There was a ton of money. You had no problem getting jobs. And I was a rep there for 20 years. I represented the women, again the women, and I represented the men. But the women were the only ones you could ever get to stand by you. They had the guts, and they would stick by you. They made being a rep worthwhile. I get into trouble for saying that the women were the mainstay of this country, and I mean Erskineville because that's where I live. My father worked, but that's all he did. I mean, it's not like the husbands today. I love seeing the blokes around today, to looking after the babies and carrying them. My father didn't know what end they walked or talked or did anything. If you look around, you'll find that a lot of the parks are named after women. You know, the Helen Lorman Reserve, there's heaps of places if you go around. Even one's named after my sister. One up here on the Erskineville Road next to the florist, right next to the little park there. That's named after Maureen Oliver. A lot of parks were named after women because they were the ones politically active, more so than the men. And Vera Roach, who was a public servant and a woman that was a legend around here, she would have had at one time 500 members in the Labour League. I mean, that's phenomenal, unbelievable. And she was what they called Joe Carl's right arm. He was the Premier, and they used to say if Joe wanted to wipe his nose, you'd have to go and get Vera to do it. Because she was powerful and strong and a great supporter of women. She, and a lot of people, a lot of men, particularly bloody white bashers and that, regretted knowing Vera, I'll tell you. She made sure they bloody behaved themselves.
My name is Frances Cusack. I live at 16 Malcolm Street, Erskineville, and I've lived in the, family's lived in the house for about 71, 72 years. I started school at Erskineville Primary School before we moved up to Auburn and Lidcombe. And then we come back, we went to Erskineville School again, and then we went to St Mary's, and I finished school at Erskineville Primary School when I was 14 years of age. 10 children in the family, 6 boys and 4 girls. I was the 4th one born. It was all right growing up in Erskineville. We never had any trouble. And
You could go out and leave your door open and you wouldn't have to worry about anybody robbing you. But now you can't go out and leave your door open. You can't walk out the backyard and leave your front door open. I moved away when I got married. I lived around in Albert Street for a little while, and then I moved to Annandale, and then I come back to Erskineville about 45 years ago and lived with my mother and took over the house. Used to have to struggle and that. You had to hand me down from one to another. Used to get to run around in bare feet sometimes. But we never starved. Mother always made sure we never starved. And there was always a feed and a bed in the house for anybody that come in. Well, when I left school I worked in a slipper factory up in Surrey Hills. And then after that I worked in the tailoring trade, making soldiers' uniforms, ladies' two-piece suits. When the war was on we were making soldiers' uniforms. I worked there until after I left to have my first child. And then when my son was only a baby, a few months old he was, I got a job down at in the candy bar at the picture show at the St James Theatre and the Liberty Theatre. Only a couple of times a week. I used to often take him with me when I went down. I was married on the 8th of November 1947. And there was a food rationing on. You didn't have any bread. The bakers were on strike the day I got married. My auntie made dampers and brought them down to us. It was a nice day. My husband was in the Air Force. My brother was in the Air Force, and I had 3 brothers that was in the Army. My father was a war veteran. He was in the First World War. And my son-in-law went to Vietnam. He's a Vietnam veteran. He come from Erskineville too. They used to say it was rough, but I never ever found it rough. I don't even find it rough now. People are always kind, and you might bump into one or two that are no good, but other than that, they're pretty well all right.
I'm Philomene Bridget Watson, and I am 95. I have lived in this little flat for 60 years. I have watched it being built. 60 years I've been living here opposite that big church there, but before that, 60 years from 95, that makes 33. And I used to live in Rochford Street, Newtown, and I lived beside an Anglican church, a very little old and quaint little Anglican church. And whenever the bell tolled, my neighbour and I would go across to see if a wedding was on, to admire the bride. And I've been quite happy living around here. Although when I first came down here, Erskineville was very, very off-putting. And people would say Erskineville with such a tone in their voice. Erskineville, now Erskineville is trendy. And it's costing many millions to come around, and there's not enough space. All used up, all the spaces. I worked in an office at one stage in the education department, and I used to always pick flowers out of our garden. We're all allotted a garden. I took some lovely gardenias in this day, and a new girl came in a very superior tone. "Oh, who brought the blooms in?" Oh, Philomene brought them in. She turned to me with a lofty look and said, "Oh, you must have a lovely garden." I said, "Well," I said, "I can always pick a few flowers to bring in." "Whereabouts do you live?" in a very lofty tone. I said, "Erskineville." She said, "Erskineville," and her voice went up with a nose. She said, "I didn't think they had any gardens there." So I said to her, I was young and red-headed at the time and come quick in the up-tub, "Whereabouts do you live, Dorothy?" "Vaucluse." I said, "Oh, Vaucluse, I know the suburb." I said, "Some grotty little spots around there too." And felt very happy with myself. We had a fence all round this estate. It was called the Erskineville Estate. And there was a fence and a gate at the top of the path, which made such a difference because people didn't come through here. Now people bound in and out of this place like as if it's just a park again. See, when I come down to the flats, that's 60 years ago. As I say, my rent receipt is still there. I don't know why I kept my rent receipt, but it's always been a good thing there. And the rent was 19 shillings a week. The Lady Gowrie Daycare Centre. There is one in every state, and it's still operating today. The Lady Gowrie would have been opened when these flats were opened. There's a dining room, and we, the mothers, who weren't allowed work, used to go down one day a week, take our turn in helping in the kitchen. So therefore they didn't have to pay for kitchen staff because the mothers took their turn for the day, and we were the staff for the Lady Gowrie. The Rapidos. Well, across the road here, the end of the church, there's a laneway, and down there would come the cart with the rabbits all lying in there in their skins. Not even skinned. I mean, they used to go out to buy a rabbit. A rabbit was a very, very delicious meal. And for 1 6 you could get a pair of rabbits. But I only ever wanted one. So, of course, I had to pay half the 1 6. And it was a very tasty thing. You brought it home. And because they skinned it for you in the cart, and you brought it home and soaked it in your warm salted water. And then the little opening, filled it up with seasoning, sewed it up and put it in the baking dish with plenty of fat, because fat, lard and dripping was well used in those days. Ah yes, go the Rapidos, that's right. Yeah, the Rapidos were our team. And I still wear red and green, and that's what I say, the club colours.
My name's Frank Dean. I live at 166 George Street, Erskineville. Mother and father, me brother Paul, my sister Kathleen, and my auntie lived in 97 George Street, Erskineville. My nana lived in, I'm not sure of the number, in George Street, Erskineville, just across the road virtually. All the neighbours knew each other. In those days you could leave your door open and no one would come in unless they was invited. Didn't have to go up to Erskineville Road to do your shopping, because on Victoria and George Street was 2 grocery shops. On the other corner was a butcher shop. Like I can remember when we was kids, there's no money. Our parents had no money, so we jumped the factory roof and pinch the lead out of the roof and sell it. And I shouldn't be saying this. Up the road there was a shop there called Theo's, and he wouldn't give us the money for the bottles, so we jump his fence, pinch the bottles and go around and sell them for lollies. Pinch fruit off people's trees. Oh, we got into all sorts of mischief. Because a lot of people had the wrong impression of the people around here then. Oh, well, that was only because, you know, like poverty was probably one reason, and they thought it was all criminals and that around here, because there, you know, possibly was. But if you didn't interfere with anyone, they wouldn't interfere with you. Well, mainly there was fights and that, but there's always a fight up the top of in the Rose of Australia and the Erskineville Hotel. But as I said, if anyone was looking for trouble, you come to Erskineville, and if you was looking for it, you'd find it. But those was the good days, really. Like, I know people say those are bad days, but I reckon those are good days. So I started work at Dulwich Footwear as an apprentice down in Monks Lane, Alexandria, apprentice bootmaker. Then I ended up joining the Sydney County Council and stayed there for 29 years. Oh, it's been sad, really, because I've missed a lot of people that I was friends with, and a lot of older people have died, and a lot of people I know that don't exist anymore. My father passed away last year, and my mother passed away 10 years earlier than that. Since he died, well, things had changed. I was his carer while he was, because he couldn't walk, and I was looking after him, and you do miss people when you're looking after them. And my sister and brother has got a share in the house too, and I can't afford to buy the two out, and I couldn't, and the house needs a lot of work on it, and I couldn't afford to do it up the way it should be done. So, and me and my sister's going to pool our money, and we're going to live on the Central Coast. Probably the first year or something, I'd say I'll be on my way home and I'll be heading for Erskineville. Yeah, I live on the Central Coast now, and I live at Yamina Beach, and it's amazing how many people from Erskineville and Newtown live up here. It's a different lifestyle to Erskineville. You've got all the beaches, you can go fishing, you've got things to do, you've got grass and everything up here, and it's great.
Arthur Darlingham, and down here for 1940. Oh, Brian, what was it?
What? 35 you were born?
Oh, my mistake. I'm having problems.
Don't worry.
What?
Hang on.
Hang on, got something else out there.
That's me there.
We both went to Erskineville Primary. Arthur finished up at Newtown Tech, and I finished up at Tempe. Well, you had to go out and get a job when you were 15. Try and get a job and come home and pay mum board. And later in life I finished up getting a job at Metis for a few years. And then the last job I had was down the Children's Hospital from 75 to 93. And took the redundancy, and for the last 5 years on mum I looked after her on a carers, and now I'm looking after Arthur's on a carers. So that's it at the moment. Father was a postman, and not like these days when they drive around in push bikes and all that, delivering the mail once a day. He had to carry a big bag on his shoulder.
Twice a day.
Twice a day. He used to come home for lunch about 11 and go back about 12:30. This was a camper down. He was a good fighter. I never seen him fight. Arthur did. He had 603 fights. There was one time he was having tea.
Oh, this is lovely.
And his trainer knocked on the door and said, "We've got a fight at Newcastle." That was that night. So they got into a sidecar motorbike, and Dad was sitting in the sidecar. And they went up all the way up to Newcastle for a fight. I think he had about 6 fights in one fortnight. He trained up the Erskineville gym on top of the dry cleaners. A lot of good fighters used to train up there.
I just thought something, Brian. Just thought. The Joy Cup there. young Spargo for the quickest knockout at North Sydney Stadium during the month of July 1934.
That's why he got it for the quickest knockout.
Yeah, when ding, then he went bang. And as the bloke went down, he cracked his back.
His leg.
So. How things happen.
Across the road, next to the pub, there used to be a few shops there. There used to be a bootmaker, and then there's the barbers, and across the road was another barber's. That's where I was sitting in the barber's chair when Kennedy got killed, assassinated on a Saturday morning, 63. They
right
call
there.
that, across the road, they call it a library for the kids. It's been there for years, but John Sargent's or something they call it over there. But before it was there, it was an old paddock, and they had an air raid shelter there, and then we used to use it for our bonfires. The old days, Mum used to have Mrs. Rolls next door, Eunice. My auntie used to live across the road. They'd be 8 o'clock in the morning out there.
All passed on.
Talking about what was going on. But now they're all gone.
And there's only four of us left.
Not many left in the street now. Mum won second prize in the lottery about 40 years ago, and the family was getting big, so she built the room in front. Used to be a veranda, but got that done, knocked down, and now it's a room. That was the girls' room, Cheryl's room. So she got married, so it's my room now. We go out, go to Marrickville Metro, do a bit of shopping, have a cup of coffee, read the papers. Got a bus service there now, which is good, 355. This afternoon, the Trots is on Tuesday afternoon. We go out there of an afternoon for a day out with the boys to have a cup of coffee and cake.
And we go to the, what one tonight?
And then we'll go out with me, a couple of other mates. We usually go to Petersham, Rochelle. Some Wednesday nights we go out to Elston Park for tea, and sometimes on a Thursday night we go over to West Lees Club or Petersham. So
to keep going.
Got a full life. And Saturday night we go out again after the races. Years ago people didn't want to live here, but now you can't buy a house. Well, they thought okay it was the slums, but now if you sell now you can't come back.
My name is Eleanor Henriksen, but I was born Eleanor Pickford, and I was known as Nellie. I lived in St Peters with my mother and sister and brother until 1927 when my mother died. She was 37. Then Dad had bought the house here in Amy Street in 1927, but he had 6 girls and 1 boy, and he decided it would be better for the 3 youngest to be put in a home where they could be schooled and learn how to do domestics and, you know, be read. When you were in the home, they started you in domestics very young. See that girl without her shoes? We used to polish, but we used to have to take her shoes off so we wouldn't scuff them. There were people that wielded the cane. I was 6 years old and I went to bed, and that was the first time I got the cane, but I couldn't talk for a week with shock. But nobody took any notice. Nobody cared. Dad used to come up to visit us every fortnight, and then we'd come home 6 weeks to Erskineville. Well, everybody knew everybody. And we had there used to be a shop on the corner of Knight Street and Amy Street, a fruit shop, which was run by Mrs. Pike. And every year she'd be waiting out the front, you know, real fidgety, waiting for us to get home. And we always went to see her. She always had nice fruit to give to us. There used to be a bloke that was in the shop on the corner of Knight Street and Amy Street, Clifford, and he was a good old man. And we used to run the block, and whoever got around first got 2 bob. 2 bob those days were all right. When you come to think of it, a tin of baked beans was only a penny, you know. And oh God, I never ever won. I run that square round the block, and now I can hardly get up the Beacon Hill. There was brickyards, 2 brick pits. One was Bakewell, and one was the Australia. And there's 2 big brick pits on either side of Mitchell Road. Further down Henderson Road, there was another big pit, and it had a pit that was full of water. And we used to go swimming there. Nobody ever got drowned. I don't think any of us could swim with dog paddle, you know. I went into the mills. I went to Alexandria. They used to call that the Black Hole of Calcutta. But of course, the union stepped in and they improved the place, you know. There was hardly any light come in, natural light come in. And it was steamy. When you're in the woolen mill, they have a fine mist coming over to settle the wool down in the spinning and the winding, you know. And it was stuffy, you know. And you couldn't see out, or you couldn't see the sky. But anyway, they made it, they come out on strike and all this business. And they won the point, you know, they opened it up and it wasn't too bad to work for, you know. These are workmates. You could see how elderly they are, but everybody had to work during the war years, you know. There's old Frank in the middle of the year. They loved him. They thought he was absolutely beautiful. Erskineville, I believe, lost 7 boys in the Great Second World War. I knew 2 of them. That's Gummy and that's Pommy. They both went into the islands in the same place together. They were going into action, Gummy. He was a big country boy, a gentle giant, I'd call him. And he did say to Pommy, I'm not going to get through this, and he didn't get through it, you know. They used to send out telegrams to tell you when the boys were killed. And this was at Beaconsfield. And anyway, there was a panic, and they said, oh God, there could be a telegram. They used to put them in the boxes. They did deliver them by hand. If they weren't home, they just put them in the boxes. So they said to me, Nellie, will you go and collect them, you know? I really didn't know, you know, until they opened it up, and I'll tell you, it was the worst day of my life. It was the worst day of my life. Evidently this bunch of boys had all joined up together into transport, and they were wiped out. Can't remember their names. But it was the worst day of my life to see those women. Then of course we lost Wal. This was on Victory Day. Somebody got a pair of old overalls and stuffed it with straw and put a head on it, and we called it Tojo. And we went down we'd been down to Martin Place, and we hanged it in Martin Place, and then we come back to Hyde Park to have something to eat. So it was a very joyous occasion, very happy occasion. it was a working class. I was up at the post office some time, weeks ago, and a bloke said to me, "Oh, when I bought a house in Erskineville, I thought to myself, oh, Erskineville, you know." And I said to him, what do you mean by that?" And he said, "Oh, it's got a bad name." I said, "Has it got a bad name? Why has it got a bad name?" He said, "Oh, well, it just had a bad name." I said, "Listen, I've lived here all my life," excuse me, "and it was a working class. We went through the Depression, certainly, but when the work come along, it turned into a working class suburb." It's just got a name, and it was the slums. But we didn't think we were living in slums. We were just backless.
A, you're adorable. B, you're so beautiful. C, you're a cutie full of charms. D, you're a darling. And E, you're excited. F, you're a feather in my arm. G, you look good to me. H, you're so heavenly. I, you're the one I idolise. J, you're like Jack and Jill. K, you're so kissable. L is the love light in your eyes. N, N, O, P. I could go on all day. Q, R, S, T, alphabetically speaking. You're okay, you make my dreams come true. You are so very sweet. W, X, Y, Z. I love to wander through the alphabet with you to tell you what you mean to me. Baba. What you mean to me.
Oh, that's brilliant.
Well, he met her down on King Street. Didn't waste no time, just outside a week to give her everything. She was young and impressionable, a little bit fresh, just out of school. Wants to take it easy.